Picture this. It is the middle of the night somewhere in the Alborz Mountains of northern Iran. A radar operator inside an IRGC air defense post is staring at his screen. His job, the job he has trained for, the job the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has spent billions of dollars preparing for, is to detect incoming threats and give his commanders enough time to respond. His radar is one of the most sophisticated Iran has, built to track aircraft at distances well over 100 kilometers. And his screen is completely blank. No contacts, no tracks, no threats, nothing. And then the mountain explodes. That is the reality of what American B-2 Spirit stealth bombers have been doing to Iran, not once, not twice, but in wave after wave of strikes that have reached into places Iran believed were completely unreachable. Underground nuclear facilities buried inside. Mountains, missile bunkers hardened with concrete and soil, an IRGC command headquarters where Iran's most senior military officers thought they were safe because they were deep enough underground that nothing could touch them. The B-2 proved every single one of those assumptions catastrophically wrong. And I am going to walk you through the full, verified, documented story of exactly how it happened. From the very first time these bombers were used against Iran, all the way through the newest strikes that have Iran scrambling for answers, it genuinely does not have. But first, I want to take you inside what this aircraft actually is, because I think most people have heard the words B-2 stealth bomber on the news and have no idea what they are actually looking at. And once you understand what this machine is capable of, the reason Iran is in full panic mode is going to make complete and total sense. So let's start from the beginning. The B-2 Spirit is the product of one of the most ambitious and secretive aerospace programs in American history. Northrop Grumman built it, the Air Force flies it, and there are only 21 of them in the entire world. Not 21 squadrons, not 21 per base, 21 airframes total. That is the entire global fleet. Originally, the program envisioned 132 aircraft, then budget pressures cut that to 75, and eventually at the end of the Cold War, that number came down to 21. Each one costs approximately $2 billion. So the United States Air Force is flying what amounts to the most expensive small fleet of aircraft ever assembled, operated exclusively out of a single location, Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. And they are the only aircraft in the American arsenal capable of delivering one specific weapon that we are going to talk about in a moment, a weapon that changed everything in this conflict. The reason the B-2 is so terrifying from an adversary's perspective starts with how it is physically shaped. It is a flying wing. There is no fuselage. There is no tail. There are no vertical surfaces of any kind. From certain angles, it looks almost organic, like a manta ray frozen in flight. And that shape is not an aesthetic choice. It is a radar-defeating engineering decision made at every level of the aircraft's construction. Radar works by sending out an electromagnetic pulse, having it bounce off an object, and then detecting the return signal. The shape of an aircraft determines how much of that energy bounces back toward the radar emitter. Conventional aircraft, with their cylindrical fuselages, tail fins, engine nacelles, and external weapons pylons, create enormous radar returns. Every protruding surface, every angle, every seam in the skin of a conventional aircraft is a potential reflection point. The B-2 creates a return comparable to a large bird, not a fighter jet. Not a bomber carrying 40,000 pounds of munitions. A bird. Against Iran's best radar systems, including their S-300 derivatives and their domestically developed Bavar 373, they are supposed to be able to track targets beyond 100 kilometers. Against the B-2, on a good day, they might detect something ambiguous at a fraction of that range, if they detect anything at all. By the time they are confident enough in what they are seeing to even consider a response, the aircraft has already released its weapons and turned for home. Now here is the part that really matters if you are an Iranian radar operator trying to do your job in this environment. When your radar returns an ambiguous hit, something that might be a bird, might be weather clutter, might be nothing, you have a decision to make. Do you call it in as a potential contact and trigger the air defense network? Or do you wait for a cleaner picture? If you call it in and you are wrong, you have burned resources and credibility on a false alarm. If you call it in and you are right, but the launch decision comes too late, it does not matter. And if you fire your surface-to-air missile on an uncertain track, you have now revealed the exact position of your SAM battery to the EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft that are orbiting just outside your detection range, listening to every electromagnetic signal you emit, waiting for you to do exactly that. One radar transmission in the wrong direction and an anti-radiation missile is already locked onto your launcher. So the B-2 does not just defeat radar by being invisible, it defeats the entire decision-making loop of the air defense system, creating so much uncertainty in the detection phase that the response phase never gets triggered in time. That cascading paralysis of the sensor and command chain is what Iran's air defenders were experiencing every single time these aircraft entered Iranian airspace. Detection teams questioning their sensors, command authorities second-guessing their operators. Missile crews hesitating on ambiguous launch solutions, and then the explosion, and the stealth goes beyond just shape. The skin of the B-2 is coated in radar-absorbent materials that scatter electromagnetic energy away from the emitter rather than reflecting it back. The engines are buried inside the wing body to reduce the heat signature that infrared sensors could detect. The weapons are carried entirely internally. No pylons hanging underneath the wings that would create radar-reflective surfaces. Even the antennas and sensors are built flush into the fuselage to eliminate protruding shapes. One defense analyst described the operational effect this way: when Iran's radar operators are looking at an ambiguous return that might be a B-2, they face an impossible choice. If they launch interceptors on an uncertain track, they waste irreplaceable surface-to-air missiles, and they reveal the location of their SAM battery to American electronic warfare aircraft, orbiting overhead, waiting for exactly that kind of transmission. If they wait for confirmation, the weapons are already falling. There is no good option when you cannot reliably see what is coming. Now layer on top of that the B-2's range. It can fly over 6,000 nautical miles without refueling. With aerial refueling, which the Air Force conducts routinely using KC-135 and KC-46 tanker aircraft, the B-2's reach is effectively global. Every single B-2 mission against Iran has been a round-trip mission originating and ending at Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. Think about that for a second. These crews are taking off from the middle of the continental United States, crossing the Atlantic Ocean, crossing the Mediterranean, entering Iranian airspace, dropping their weapons, and flying home. We are talking about missions in excess of 30 consecutive hours of flight time for a two-person crew, not a squadron of 12 pilots rotating in shifts. 2 people, flying for more than 30 hours, and doing it while navigating one of the world's most complex air defense environments. If you want to understand why this capability alone sends Iran into strategic panic, picture being on the Iranian side of this problem. You cannot detect the aircraft on radar with any certainty. You do not know if it is coming until something explodes. And even if you knew it was airborne over Missouri, there is nothing you can physically do to intercept it before it reaches your territory. You cannot scramble fighters. You cannot pre-position defenses along the route. You are essentially waiting for the phone to ring in the worst possible way. That asymmetry is the foundation of why Iran's military planners are genuinely frightened by this aircraft in a way that no other weapon in the American arsenal quite matches. So let's talk about what the B-2 did first, and then what it did next. Because the escalation arc of its use in this conflict is something that tells you a great deal about where things stand right now. The first time the B-2 was used against Iran in this current period of conflict was June 22, 2025, in an operation called Midnight Hammer. And this is where the other piece of this puzzle comes in, a weapon called the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator, or MOP. The GBU-57 is 30,000 pounds. To put that in perspective, the average American car weighs about 4,000 pounds. The GBU-57 is more than 7 times the weight of a car, all of it precision-guided, all of it built to do one specific thing: drill through solid rock and reinforced concrete and explode at a depth of up to 200 feet underground. The steel casing is engineered to survive impact with hardened material long enough to penetrate before the warhead detonates. The fusing is calibrated specifically so the bomb does not explode on surface contact, but continues driving downward through the facility before releasing its energy in a shockwave that generates what engineers call an overpressure effect, a wall of compressed force that destroys the internal structure of whatever chamber the bomb reaches. And the B-2 is the only aircraft in the world that can carry it. One B-2 can carry 2 of them. And this weapon took 15 years to develop, with Iran's deeply buried Fordo nuclear facility as one of its primary design drivers. On June 22, 2025, 7 B-2s departed Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. Each one was carrying 2 GBU-57s. Think about the crew of each of those aircraft for a moment. 2 pilots per aircraft, 14 people total, climbing into the most expensive bomber ever built and flying east from the center of America. Their families were informed of the mission on the evening of June 21st. The same evening, the rest of the world found out the strikes were happening. Those crews flew more than 18 hours before they were over their targets. More than 18 hours sitting in a 2-person cockpit over open ocean, over friendly airspace, over hostile territory, knowing what was in the weapons bays beneath them and what they were about to do with it. In 25 minutes of sustained strikes over Fordo and Natanz, Iran's most protected nuclear enrichment facilities, buried inside a mountain, 14 of those bombs fell. At Fordo specifically, the B-2s dropped 6 bombs each down 2 of the facility's air shafts, which were the structural weak points in an otherwise hardened mountain fortress. 12 MOPs went into Fordo, 2 went into Natanz. Here is the most dangerous moment of the entire mission for those crews. When the weapons bay doors open to release the bombs, the B-2 momentarily loses some of its stealth characteristics. The bay creates a cavity that reflects radar energy in ways the closed airframe does not. That 25-minute window of weapons release is when the aircraft is at its most detectable, and Iran never saw it even then. Simultaneously, a U.S. submarine launched more than 24 Tomahawk cruise missiles at the Isfahan nuclear facility on the surface. Satellite imagery from Maxar Technologies captured the aftermath. Large craters where the shafts had been, the surrounding area blanketed in dirt and ash. Iran's air defenses did not fire a single shot. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Dan Kane, told reporters afterward that Iran's fighters did not fly, and their surface-to-air missile systems did not track the B-2s entering and exiting Iranian airspace. Iran, a country that has spent decades and untold billions building one of the most layered air defense networks in the region, specifically to counter this scenario, was caught completely flat-footed. They had no idea what was happening until it was over. And here is what makes this even more remarkable. Iran had watched those B-2s departing Missouri on open-source flight tracking software. 6 B-2s were tracked, moving from Whiteman toward Guam on June 21st, well before the strikes. Analysts noted the aircraft appeared to be refueling shortly after departure, suggesting they were heavy, meaning they were carrying a maximum payload. The entire world could see the aircraft were probably moving toward something significant, and Iran still could not stop what came next. So that was June 2025. Now let's fast forward to February 28th, 2026, because when the United States launched Operation Epic Fury, the B-2 was back, and this time the campaign was not a single night's work. It was a sustained multi-month air campaign. In the first 24 hours of Epic Fury, B-2s struck Iranian ballistic missile facilities, using 2,000-pound GBU-31 bombs against hardened underground sites. 4 B-2s confirmed in initial strikes. Within 72 hours, CENTCOM Admiral Brad Cooper, the head of U.S. Central Command, held a press conference on March 6th and announced that B-2s had struck approximately 200 targets deep inside Iran over the previous 72 hours, focusing specifically on what he described as areas surrounding Tehran. He declined to name precise locations, but analysts tracking open-source satellite imagery immediately understood what he was referring to. The Alborz Mountains north of Tehran are home to what intelligence agencies and defense researchers call Iran's missile cities, vast underground complexes carved into the mountain rock where the IRGC stores and operates its most sensitive ballistic missile systems. These are not improvised bunkers. These are engineered, reinforced underground facilities that Iran has been building and expanding for years, specifically because they believed depth and solid rock made them invulnerable. And the B-2 was going after them with 2,000-pound precision bombs and sustained strikes over multiple days, and then came Taliban 2. This is a facility at the Parchin military complex, southeast of Tehran, and it carries a particularly dark history. Taliban 2 was the site where Iran's weapons program tested the high explosive lenses needed to detonate a nuclear device, before Iran suspended that program in 2003. It had been struck before, by Israeli aircraft in October 2024 and again in June 2025. And each time it was struck, Iran rebuilt it. But before the February 2026 campaign began, satellite imagery showed something alarming. Iran had encased Taliban 2 in a concrete sarcophagus, a term borrowed from the nuclear industry, and then piled soil over that concrete. They had watched what happened to Fordo and Natanz. They had seen what a GBU-57 could do to a hardened facility, and so they tried to make Taliban 2 hard enough to survive. They put concrete inside concrete and then covered the whole thing in earth, essentially creating a man-made hill over the facility. On March 12, 2026, B-2s struck Taliban 2, and the satellite imagery that followed, released by analysts at the Institute for Science and International Security on March 12th, showed 3 large penetration holes, driven straight through the top of the facility into the area where the suspected nuclear weapons testing equipment was housed. The sarcophagus Iran spent months building did not save the facility, because there is no concrete thick enough and no depth of soil sufficient to stop a weapon that weighs 30,000 pounds and is specifically engineered to drill through hardened material. Iran hardened their site with full knowledge that the B-2 was coming. It did not matter. Now pause here for a second because I want you to feel the strategic weight of what that moment represents. The Iranians knew the strikes were coming. They could see on open source tracking that American bombers were in the air. They had watched what those bombs did to Fordo. They had spent the previous months pouring concrete and moving soil in a deliberate effort to survive the next strike. And when it came, the result was exactly the same. That is the kind of revelation that would shatter the assumptions of any military planning staff. Everything you built to protect this facility, every ton of concrete, every layer of hardening, was insufficient. And there is nothing in your inventory that can stop the aircraft delivering those bombs. CENTCOM was managing an extraordinarily complex joint operation, the most dangerous kind of mission any military conducts, a combat search and rescue in hostile mountainous terrain, while Iranian forces actively hunted the downed crew with bounties on their heads. Every resource in the command was oriented toward getting those 2 Americans out alive. The operation had already seen helicopter crews take fire, wounded personnel, and a 160th SOAR Night Stalker crews pushing themselves to the absolute edge of what was operationally feasible. Everything about that moment was high stakes, time sensitive, and demanding the full attention of American military command. And right in the middle of all of that, while the rescue was still actively in progress, U.S. intelligence brought in a time-sensitive target. A large number of senior IRGC commanders had gathered inside an underground headquarters bunker near Tehran. Intelligence had identified the facility and pinpointed their location inside it. This was what military planners call a fleeting target, a window that opened and would close, and if you did not act inside that window, the opportunity was gone. The IRGC commanders gathering in one location underground was exactly the kind of intelligence goal that justifies an immediate dynamic strike. And CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper made a decision. He ordered B-2 bombers from Whiteman Air Force Base to fly a round-trip mission from Missouri, across the Atlantic, across the Mediterranean, into Iran, to drop GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators on that underground bunker, while simultaneously managing the rescue of the downed F-15E crew. The B-2s flew from Missouri, hit the underground IRGC headquarters with bunker busters, and flew back to Missouri, a mission of well over 30 hours, while the rescue operation was still in progress, according to high-level U.S. defense sources who spoke to Fox News. The underground IRGC headquarters was obliterated. The facility was destroyed. Think about the operational picture that creates for Iran's surviving leadership. They cannot hide above ground because U.S. and Israeli aircraft own the Iranian sky, so they go underground. And then B-2s follow them underground with a bomb specifically designed to do nothing but destroy underground facilities. The command structure is being systematically dismantled from the top down. At least 16 senior Iranian leaders were killed in the opening phases of Operation Epic Fury, including Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei himself, killed in the opening hours of February 28th, along with family members and top IRGC commanders who were gathered at a meeting. Armed Forces Chief of Staff Abdolrahim Musavi, IRGC Commander-in-Chief Mohammad Pakpour, Defense Minister Aziz Nasserzadeh, all killed in coordinated strikes on day one. The entire top tier of Iran's military command eliminated simultaneously. The intelligence operation that enabled U.S. and Israeli forces to know those commanders would be in the same place at the same time was reportedly built around intercepting and acting on intelligence about a defense council meeting in Tehran. And this is where Iran's panic becomes genuinely visible if you know where to look. The country is now being governed by what analysts describe as an unstable triumvirate, a combination of Mojtaba Khamenei serving as ideological figurehead and military and parliamentary figures trying to hold a coherent decision-making structure together. On July 1st, 2026, Iran's state broadcaster IRIB abruptly cut the live feed of an interview with Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf right in the middle of him discussing treaty concessions. The feed just went dead. Nobody explained why. Defense analysts noted that kind of abrupt cut is a telling signal. It suggests either internal disagreement so sharp that someone pulled the plug on live television, communication problems within the leadership structure severe enough that a broadcast could not be managed without incident. Neither option is a sign of a government in control of its situation, and the strikes have not stopped. On July 29th, 2026, just 2 days ago from when I am recording this, CENTCOM completed what they called a heavy wave of strikes against Iran. The operation began at 8 p.m. Eastern Time and was completed by 10 p.m. Eastern. 2 hours of sustained precision strikes. The targets included IRGC military command centers, missile and drone facilities, coastal surveillance and defense sites, and maritime capabilities. CENTCOM's official statement said the strikes were designed to further diminish threats posed by Iran and its proxies to American forces, commercial shipping, and neighboring Gulf countries. This came 24 hours after Iran's IRGC fired multiple ballistic missiles at Muwafaq Salti Air Base in Jordan, an attack CENTCOM called an attempted surprise attack, all of which were intercepted. Trump told Fox News Iran was going to get a beating, and then the aircraft went up. This is day 152 of the 2026 Iran war, and the B-2s are still going to work. So here is what I want you to take away from everything we just walked through, because I think there is a strategic insight here that gets completely lost when this conflict is covered as a series of daily strike reports. If you had told an Iranian defense planner 5 years ago that the scenario they would face is this, the United States can take off from Missouri, fly over your country completely undetected by your best radar systems, drop weapons that can reach 200 feet underground and destroy whatever is inside, and land back in Missouri before you have fully processed what just happened, that planner would have looked at you and said, that is a nightmare scenario. That is the scenario we have spent decades and billions of dollars trying to prevent. And that is exactly the scenario that is playing out. Every Iranian military doctrine for the past 20 years has assumed that depth is safety. If you go deep enough underground, if you build your concrete thick enough, if you bury your command structure far enough below the surface, you create a survivability insurance policy against air attack. The B-2 and the GBU-57 together have effectively canceled that insurance policy. There is now no target in Iran that the United States cannot reach. Above ground, below ground, inside a mountain, under a concrete sarcophagus, the combination of a platform that cannot be detected and a weapon that cannot be stopped by depth is the strategic equation that is driving genuine panic inside what remains of the IRGC leadership structure. And the proof is in their behavior. They tried to harden Taliban too. It did not work. They moved senior commanders underground. The B-2 followed them underground. They are running out of places to put things they want to protect. And I want to be clear about something before I go further. Everything in this video comes from verified sources. CENTCOM official press releases, Department of Defense fact sheets, CBS News, Air and Space Forces magazine, The War Zone, Fox News, The Wall Street Journal, and the Institute for Science and International Security. These are documented operational facts, and understanding them matters enormously for anyone trying to make sense of what is happening right now. Right here is where I want to ask you something directly. If this video gave you a clearer picture of what is actually happening, the real capability being deployed, the real reason Iran's leadership is in genuine distress, then do me one favor right now and hit that subscribe button. Because this is what we do here. Deep research, verified facts, no noise. We are going to be covering every major development in this conflict as it unfolds, and you are not going to want to miss the next one. Subscribe now and turn on the bell so nothing slips past you. Now here is the final layer of this story that I think deserves attention, because it is something almost nobody in the daily news cycle is discussing clearly enough. The B-2 campaign against Iran is not just a demonstration of American military capability in isolation. It is a demonstration visible to every single adversary the United States has anywhere in the world. China's military planners in Beijing are watching what these aircraft did to Iran's underground facilities, and they are running updated assessments of their own hardened bunkers right now. North Korea's weapons program has relied on underground facilities for decades as survivability insurance. Russia has extensive hardened underground military infrastructure built during the Soviet era. Every one of those countries is being given a real-world data point about what GBU-57s dropped from B-2s actually do to reinforced underground targets. Not in a testing environment, not in a simulation, but in actual combat against facilities that were purpose-built to survive this kind of attack. Taliban 2 had a concrete sarcophagus and a layer of soil. The B-2 punched through it anyway. That fact lands differently in Beijing and Pyongyang than any press release or capability brief ever could. The strategic signal being sent right now goes far beyond the Iran conflict. And every military planner with responsibility for hardened underground assets anywhere in the world is recalculating the math of what depth actually buys them in 2026. There is also an urgent capability question that defense planners inside the Pentagon are grappling with right now, and it does not get nearly enough attention in the daily news cycle. The B-2 fleet is 21 aircraft. 21. And while these missions have been extraordinarily effective, sustaining a long-term high-tempo operational campaign against a country the size of Iran with a fleet of 21 aircraft carries real operational risk. Every aircraft that is in the air is an aircraft that is accumulating airframe hours. Every 30-plus hour round-trip mission from Missouri to Iran puts stress on airframes, on engines, on the radar-absorbent coating that makes the stealth work. Maintaining that coating is painstaking, labor-intensive work. Even small damage to the surface can degrade the radar cross-section in ways that matter in a contested environment. Maintenance crews at Whiteman are working around the clock to keep these aircraft ready, and the pace of operations these past 5 months has been unlike anything in the B-2's history. The Air Force has been developing the B-21 Raider, a next-generation stealth bomber designed from the ground up, incorporating everything learned from decades of B-2 operations. And the Iran conflict has made the case for that program with a force that no capability brief or budget hearing ever could. The readiness and continued availability of this specific fleet matters enormously to what happens next in this war, and that is a constraint worth understanding clearly. What you are watching is the most sustained combat use of the B-2 Spirit in its 35-plus years of service. What you are watching is the first ever real-world deployment of the GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator against hardened targets, a weapon that took 15 years to build and it was designed specifically for this kind of mission. What you are watching is a military campaign that has systematically eliminated the assumption that any target is safe from American air power, simply because it is buried deep enough underground. And that, the elimination of that assumption, is exactly why Iran's surviving leadership is in a state of genuine strategic panic that they cannot publicly admit and cannot privately resolve. There is a video I'm putting together right now specifically on what happens next in this conflict, what Iran's realistic options are from here, whether the ceasefire talks have any real path forward, and what the B-21 Raider coming online means for this kind of deep strike capability going forward. That breakdown is going to be thorough, it is going to be fully sourced, and it is going to be here on this channel. If you are not subscribed yet, now is the time. Hit that button, turn the notification on, and I will see you there. This conflict is not over. The B-2s are not done. The latest wave of strikes completed on July 29th proves that, and the story of what this aircraft has done to Iran's military infrastructure, and to the iron assumption that the IRGC built its entire strategic doctrine around, that going deep enough underground made you safe from anything, is one of the most significant military capability demonstrations of the 21st century. The B-2 did not just strike targets, it destroyed a belief. It proved that there is no depth, no concrete, no mountain, and no bunker that puts you beyond the reach of American air power when these aircraft and these weapons are in the equation. Stay informed, stay absolutely sharp, and see you in the next one.